becoming the leading alternative to vaping and smoking, and fume is the leader in that category. Fume fills the void. Ditching a bad habit can leave while you still have something to reach for. It has no vapor or nicotine, and you can use it anywhere. Crisp mint is my favorite flavor, and with non-toxic flavors it's a guilt-free alternative, and my favorite part is it requires no battery, so you'll never need to charge it. The piece also looks cool and is made to be fidgeted with to help screen. Until I was about 25 I lived in a beach town. My specific neighborhood was about a 20-minute walk from the beach. I'd say about 80% of my personality was beach related. I've been surfing longer than I've been able to speak in it. Would be an anomaly for me to shake out a pair of shoes and not have some amount of sand all out. My two best friends, let's call them Armin and Chuck, were extroverted, outgoing and charismatic. We were all 18 and very much obsessed with girls. It was a Saturday night in late May, just a few weeks before school let out. Senioritis had long since set in, and at this point my friends and I regularly pushed the limits of how much we could get away with without getting in trouble. We already had our co-ed college acceptances, so we didn't really care much about high school anymore. Armand and I had plans to meet up with two girls from our high school that we'd been getting along with really well at school. The plan was to pick the two of them up in the evening and enjoy a cool, breezy night on the beach. We had blankets and a few bottles of wine, the perfect combinations for stargazing on the beach. I don't condominium drinking and driving to any capacity, but I was just a stupid kid. I arrived at Sophia's house just after 9 o'clock. Her and FR sort of walk dank to the car. It was clear that they had a little something to drink beforehand. Armin and I exchanged some excited grins. It was going to be a fun night. I took a scenic route to a scenic beach. It was about a 30-minute drive. The whole time the four of us were having a great time in the car, cracking jokes and talking about some mutual friends. At 1.4 and I were having a very deep philosophical conversation about the nature of time and death and such. We were all very much enjoying each other's company. The specific beach I had chosen had a dirt path that you could drive a car up. From there was a more narrow sand path that we would walk. The path was actually pretty steep, but I had picked it because we were less likely to encounter any other people at such a secluded spot. Furthermore, this beach was further away from the main boardwalk, so the sky would be clearer for stargazing. I thought of everything. I parked my car as far up the dirt road as possible, and the four of us hopped out. Armin and I carried the blankets and wine. I'll fast forward through the boring stuff. After a few hours in an empty bottle, Armin and I found ourselves separating. He and friend walked up the beach, and Sophia and I walked in the opposite direction. After being separated by a decent amount of distance and darkness, I threw my blanket down and we drunkenly fell asleep on top of it. Before anything happened, Sophia tensed up. At first I thought it was something that I had done, but then she whispered, "Something, do you hear that?" I focused my attention and strained my ears, trying to hear something other than the gentle crashing of ocean waves. I assumed she was just drunk, but then to my surprise I did hear something. It sounded almost like a worrying, like the sound a small engine would make. The sound seemed to be moving around. I couldn't pin down where it was even coming from. Then it seemed to fade away into nothingness. "It's nothing," I assured her, eager to resume what we had been doing. And that's what we did. Soon after, I fished my shirt from the sand and shook it out before throwing it over my head. Just then, Sophia, who was still lying on the blanket, shrieked. I whipped around to look at her and saw she was pointing up at something. I looked up but couldn't see anything besides the blackness of the sky. I sat down next to her to get a better angle, and I was horrified. From her point of view, the moon was perfectly aligned with what appeared to be a drone floating directly overhead. It hovered a little while longer before zipping up into the dark sky and disappearing out of sight. It all made sense. That noise that we had heard before was 100% the drone. I got angry at myself for not realizing at the time. I then got sick at the thought of being watched that entire time. I glanced over at Sophia and could tell she had the same exact feeling. She put her head in her hands and started crying. I consoled her as best I could before suggesting we walk back to the car. The two of us made it to the car to find Armin and Fran already there. I quickly explained the situation the two of them were, dumbfounded and same reason as was Armin's. I decided to ask Armin to call up Chuck, which he did. Chuck's house was massive and his parents were super chill. It was honestly the perfect spot to our delight. Chuck was free. I pulled into Chuck's driveway and parked the car. Armin and the two girls began making their way towards Chuck's front door, and I told them I'd catch up to them in a second. I needed a second to think about everything that had just happened. I was more shaken up than I was letting on, so I leaned my forehead against the steering wheel and closed my eyes in an attempt to calm down a bit. Honestly, those few seconds with my eyes closed really helped. Instinctively I pulled out my phone, which I hadn't even touched since the incident. The screen lit up and I stared at the single notification that sat on the display. I had to blink a few times to make sure I wasn't imagining it. My entire body froze as I stared in horror at the lone notification: air tag found moving with you. Every emotion that I had just expelled from my body came crashing back. We were literally being tracked. I snapped out of my paralysis and jumped out of the car, examining every inch of the vehicle. Nothing on the front bumper, nothing in the grille, and nothing on the back. I started getting desperate, checking the seats and flipping floor mats. Still nothing. By now, sweat was pouring down my neck and I could feel the hairs on my arms and legs clamping up. I got on my hands and knees and began examining the underside of my car. I got to the tire on the driver's side and began feeling around the tire. Well, and there it was. It was literally taped to the UND side of the well. Impossible to find if you didn't know what you were looking for. I held the tag in my hand for a few seconds before throwing it to the ground and smashing it to pieces. Whoever had watched us on the beach with that drone knew where we were. I didn't feel safe in Chuck's driveway all alone. I picked up one